Today, we are visiting a hidden gem which is located at the Outer Banks Visitor Center in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. And this is about 7 miles north of the more well-known Wright Brothers Museum and Memorial. This hidden gem is called Monument to a Century in Flight, and it was dedicated November 8, 2003, just a few days short of 100 years since the Wright Brothers' first flight in 1903. Let's check it out.
All right, folks, this is a cool little path that we take and some steps to get to the monument to the Century of Flight. Wow, this is really awesome. I can't believe there's not more information about this. Cool thing about somebody who donated towards the monument. We'll come around here and take a look at everything. Yo, this is so cool. It starts out and goes all the way around the circle. It starts in 1903 and ends over here in the late 1900s into 2000. So we'll check it out here, see what everything has. I'm not going to read everything on every monument, but this one starts in Kitty Hawk, right here where we are, with Orville and Wilbur Wright, who accomplished the world's first powered, controlled, sustained manned flight in heavier-than-air machine. And then it goes on to 1906 in Paris, France, the first flight in Europe. And then 1909, first to fly across the English Channel. In 1909, Orville Wright delivered the two-seat observation aircraft to the U.S. Army Signal Corps. This is just so cool. And there's lots of sponsors down here on the ground that helped donate to it. Let's check out this next monument here. 1912, first parachute jump from a powered airplane. I'll just hit a few highlights of each of these. Harriet Quimby was the first woman to fly across the English Channel in 1912. In 1914, they had the first two-way radio contact between pilot and ground. In 1918, U.S. officially establishes airmail service. And over here, continues on in 1918. In 1922, the USS Langley, the first American aircraft carrier, is commissioned. And in-flight refueling was introduced in 1923. In 24, they had the first around-the-world flight with the U.S. Army Air Service. Lots of cool things down here on the ground. Wachovia sponsored this block, which doesn't exist anymore. They've now mostly known as Wells Fargo. So this next block is 1926 through 1929. Charles Lindbergh and his Spirit of St. Louis became the first solo across the Atlantic. Lots of other cool things happened. The first around-the-world flight by the Graf Zeppelin happened in 1929. Then on this one, we're still in 1929 down to 1935. Amelia Earhart became the first woman and second person to fly solo across the Atlantic. Then the next one here, we start with 1936. First international airline routes established. In 1930s, radar is introduced. And then 41 to 46, the Tuskegee Airmen achieved distinguished role in aviation through determination and perseverance against tremendous odds. And we move on to the next one, 1943 down to 1949. First pilot to fly faster than the speed of sound, Chuck Yeager, in the Bell X-1 research plane. This is so cool. Then over here, look at a few of the sponsors: RBC, Centura, the Bank of Currituck, First Flight Society, Town of Kitty Hawk. On this one, they start in 1948. Francis and Gertrude Regalo invented the flexible wing. 1957, Soviets launched first artificial space satellite in space, Sputnik. In 1958, the U.S. satellite Explorer launched. In 58, 1 million passengers fly the Atlantic, surpassing total steamship passengers. And in 1958, the FAA was established. And over here, we've got 1958, NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, established. Yuri Gagarin of USSR becomes first man in space in 1961. In 1961, we also had the first American in space, who was Alan B. Shepard Jr. in the Mercury spacecraft Freedom 7. And then John Glenn Jr. was the first American to orbit the Earth in the Mercury Friendship 7. So that's all 1958 to 62. And we move over here, and we've got 1962 to 1966. Lots of space things happening in this decade, including the first U.S. spacecraft to orbit and photograph the moon in 1966, the Lunar Orbiter. Civil Air Patrol sponsors. Association of Flight Attendants sponsored one of these blocks. North Carolina Aviation Community supporters. In honor of women in aviation on this block. So this one is 1968 to 1972. World's first space station, Soviet Soyuz, placed in orbit. World's first wide-body airliner, the Boeing 747, was introduced in 1968. Then over here we have 1972. First flight of F-16A Falcon ushers in era of lightweight fighters. This one goes all the way down to 1979. Then the next one, 1981 to 1989. More things happened. The space shuttle era began with the launch and return to Earth of Columbia, followed in the decade by Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour. Lots of cool things. Then 1980s unmanned aerial vehicles advanced for intelligence reconnaissance operations. And then our last one is right here. Starts in 1990 with the Hubble telescope, provided vision into space from orbit around the Earth. The Mars Pathfinder, 1997, first components of the National Space Station. Ellen Collins becomes the first woman commander of a space shuttle, and in 2000 the first crew of International Space Station arrived in orbit, establishing continuous human presence in space. And the people of Dare County sponsored in this area. This is just such an awesome display, folks. Hope you enjoy this video with a lot of the history of space. I'm going to back out a little bit so you can see there's a little thing here that looks kind of like the Earth with all the different types of flight around it on the bottom. This is really cool. I'll show you that. Looks like the Zeppelin down there. Bi-wing airplanes, some of the first ones. Really cool stuff here. All right, folks. Hope you enjoy this video on the monument to a century in flight. Everything from airplanes to spacecraft, everything you can imagine is encapsulated in this monument. And it's really crazy that it's not really talked much about or anywhere around here And even the signs that point to this just call it the Outer Banks Visitor Center. And then when you get in here, you see a sign about the Monument of Flight. So kind of a hidden gem here in the Outer Banks. If you get a chance to visit it, definitely try it out. And you could spend some time here just reading all of these monuments. So I hope you enjoy this video and this information, and as we continue our trip here in the Outer Banks. Thanks, everyone. And down here, folks, there's so many bricks with names of people that contributed to this monument. So many, there's just impossible to cover all of them, but just wanted to give you kind of a brief show of all these bricks that lay between all of the monuments. Maybe some of the bigger ones you can see. Dowdy's Amusement Park, Rotary, a couple of Rotary International districts, North Carolina Air Force Association, United States Air Force, Kelly's Outer Banks, law firm. So many places contributed to this. Just gives you an idea of what all went into this. All these names, lots and lots and lots of names on these bricks. The Will family. Over here we have Kitty Dunes Realty in honor of air crews who did not return. Foundation for Coast Guard History. Just an awesome monument here. Hope you enjoy all the information sharing in this video. All right, folks, this is the ramp we came up to get to it. Just wanted to note too that the monument to Century of Flight is not in any way related to the Wilbur and Orville Wright Flight Museum that we're gonna visit as well. It's a little further down, about 7 miles from here. Here's a cool little thing at the end about John McGee Jr. He was a 19-year-old American serving with the Royal Canadian Air Force in Britain, and he wrote this in 1941. He was killed that December in the Spitfire over England. There's a time capsule that is associated with this that says down at the bottom. That's really cool. It's a message to the people of 2103. They're supposed to open it in December of 2103. That is cool.